I'm Adeline and it is so nice to meet you. Welcome to the 76 Celebrity Synastry chart reading where we will be covering Louis Tomlinson and Zayn Malik. For those new and returning, I take notes on a Synastry chart looking at the personal planets, signs, aspects, and of birth times available house overlays. I also add my insights and interpretations along the way. Feel free to leave your own in the comments below. Before we start the reading, give this video a like and subscribe for more Celebrity Synastry chart readings from me. Let's get into it. Starting off the sun, both their signs are in Capricorn, so they are a successful business team. Understandably so, that goes without saying really. Dry relationship, and it's a practical relationship. They appreciate each other's maturity and they build a secure, stable life together. I feel like kind of the epitome of the relationship. Louis' sun overlaid in Zayn's 10th house. Louis sees Zayn as an authority figure. Louis accepts Zayn without thinking, which is nice, and I feel like understandable under the circumstances they met. Louis believes he deserves respect from Zayn, and Zayn enjoys the respect he receives from Louis. Louis thinks Zayn is more intellectual than him. Zayn's sun overlaid in Louis' 9th house. They teach the other, particularly it seems like on Zayn's end. I mean, Louis seems to admire him intellectually, so potentially, there is a teaching element there. It's a great and enduring friendship, and it's a relationship of mental stimulation. They both share similar views, and they both influence the other to be more culturally aware. I mean, I'm not sure where Louis is from, but, I think during the whole One Direction thing, Zayn's difference in, race, ethnicity was always made like a kind of a big deal. So that is somewhere where potentially Louis could be helped to be more culturally aware being around Zayn. Zayn's sun sextile Louis' Venus. Louis boosts Zayn's ego and Zayn feels adored by Louis. This is an interesting element because, we were just seeing how Louis really admires Zayn, respects him, he's an authority figure. So he seems to really look up to Zayn. Both have a desire for cooperation and harmony. Zayn's sun conjunct Louis' Neptune. It's a very spiritual relationship and Zayn is fascinated by Louis. Intuitive communication and understanding, and both need to be careful to not confuse reality and illusions. I feel like, being the age they were when all of this happened, being in this together, potentially maybe they struggled with what is real and what is fake sort of thing. This relationship boosts Zayn's intuitiveness. Zayn's sun sextile Louis' Pluto. There's a strong connection and they are more powerful together, which I feel like kind of sucks on one end. But I feel like, it was good for the time, and obviously, producers of X Factor saw that. But I feel like it also kind of sucks because it's not like their careers are terrible now by any means, but I feel like compared to what was happening in One Direction, it's a very big drop. Particularly, on Zayn's end, I feel like, he seems to be a bit more successful. I hear things about him. Louis, I don't think I hear anything about him. So it kind of sucks that, they're more powerful together. They comfortably share secrets. I'm sure they would have a lot. They live a very unique life together. Now for the intermission. This video is brought to you by me, my Etsy store, Adeline the Astrologer. If you ever watch this and think, hey, I would like her to read my Synastry chart, well, I will. I do personalized Synastry readings on my Etsy store, both basic and detailed. The basic one is very simple to understand. It's not overwhelming at all. It's pretty good for those that are beginners to astrology, just getting the head around astrology, or just as a fun gift idea. The detailed one is just like what I do on my channel, just a lot of insight and interpretation on your chart. So if you are interested in that and everything else astrology and tarot related, readings and gifts, then definitely check out my Etsy store. Links are below. I'm always releasing new things, so definitely check it out if you're interested. You can even just favorite the store just to show your support for free. Thanks for listening, and let's get back to the reading. So it's time for moon. So we have Louis' moon in Leo and Zayn's moon in Virgo. They are opposites, and Zayn is happy to let Louis be at the center. That's kind of funny. Louis craves more appreciation than Zayn gives, and Zayn's perfectionism can be difficult for Louis to deal with. This is interesting, especially in a creative sense. If Zayn is a perfectionist and Louis kind of wants to get it over and done with, that would be difficult, especially because they're spending all their time together working. Zayn may be embarrassed by Louis. Oh, that's sad. Zayn's conservativeness clashes with Louis' superficiality. Potentially, maybe they have just a different relationship with fame. I mean, we just saw like Louis craves more attention and like he is happy to be at the center. Potentially, there was quite a contrast of like, I guess maybe why they went into this. Like, maybe Zayn went into this like for the music. He just wanted to be like, follow his passion and everything. But Louis, on the other hand, maybe did like the music, but there was also a big motivation of like, being famous and everything and like having that sort of attention on him, which I can imagine would cause conflict like within a band, like, why you are there in the first place, especially if like Louis doesn't really care about the music as much as Zayn. Louis' moon overlaid in Zayn's 6th house. Louis has conflicting feelings towards Zayn. Yeah, I see this. I mean, literally we were seeing how he admires him so much, but also finds his perfectionism difficult to deal with. Both are too helpful to each other and can be beneficial if working towards a mutual goal. Yeah, easy to create a resentful relationship. I mean, so far with their motivations for, I guess, why they are there, that I feel like is not a great start. Zayn's moon overlaid in Louis' 5th house. Zayn drops his emotional guard around Louis, and Zayn feels an emotional connection with Louis. Louis is flattered by Zayn, so it seems like they're both quite flattered by each other. They both seem to like really admire each other or really appreciate something significant about the other. Louis appreciates their emotional relationship, which is nice because we both saw they comfortably share secrets, so they actually have a good foundation for that. Both enjoy spending time together and they have lots of fun together. Very nice to see. Louis' moon is sextile Zayn's Jupiter. Good fortune, and they're a popular couple. There's a lot of these things that are just like, yeah, of course. There's honest communication and likely for them to support charities. I mean, they did, I think was it the Red Nose thing they did together as a band? So that would have been a thing. Excessiveness could be an issue and have an intellectual understanding. So far with the excessiveness, we've only really seen maybe Zayn's perfectionism, but hopefully we'll see more. Louis' moon opposite Zayn's Saturn. They both have something the other needs. In a way, yes, with what we have seen, Zayn kind of needs Louis', I guess, desire for fame. Both have something the other needs. I see this considering what we have seen. Zayn has the talent, which Louis needs if he, wants fame. You need, actual good music to put out there for that attention. But on the other hand, I feel like Zayn kind of needs Louis' drive for being talented for fame and, having that attention. Because otherwise, yes, Zayn's talented, but you also need that kind of drive to, really push your music out there to actually, profit off of your music. And to, have it as a viable passion, if that makes sense, Zayn tries to influence Louis, which I don't feel like Louis would be against as such. Difficult emotional connection, and Zayn sees Louis as needy and immature. Louis needs to be more independent from Zayn. In what way? That's interesting. I mean, I guess you could see it, from the band, especially now. I know it sounds mean of me to be like, Louis is not successful, but, I feel like out of all of them, I feel like he's kind of taken the biggest hit from leaving One Direction and kind of still being attached to it. Zayn's moon is square Louis' Mercury. It's emotionally challenging and Zayn has a hard time getting Louis to listen, which is interesting. I really see the conflicting feelings with Louis. It seems like he does admire Zayn, but not, truly where he, actually, takes into consideration what he might say and everything. Zayn feels Louis doesn't value his opinions or respect him intellectually, what I just said. Louis feels Zayn is sensitive to criticism and they both need to learn to listen. Yeah. Louis feels frustrated with Zayn. I mean, with what we saw before, how, he gets a bit, difficult with Zayn's perfectionism. Zayn's moon is square Louis' Mars. It's a stormy relationship, yikes. They both will need to work out issues as they come, and Louis doesn't have the patience to connect with Zayn's feelings. So there seems to be an emotional disconnect. I feel like we did see, they comfortably share secrets and all of that, but I feel like that's all they really have to have that trust in each other. Other than that, I feel like emotionally there's just a big disconnect there. It's an emotional roller coaster and they are very reactive to each other. Possibility for codependency. Yeah, I see that. I mean, we saw this on Louis' end. He needs to learn how to be independent. So it would be in that. I wonder if in the band and particularly with Zayn, Maybe he was a bit codependent in some ways. It's hard to relax together, and Louis' dependence makes Zayn feel insecure. Interesting. I feel like Louis, in this relationship, I feel like he's a bit lost. It could be with the whole band, but maybe, he seems to admire Zayn. Maybe he feels a bit insecure and lost with what he wants and everything. Resentment can grow, yeah. So I guess between these two, resentment grew. Zayn's moon conjunct to Louis' Jupiter. Easy to overdo and be excessive, and it's a relationship of opportunities and fortune, which we do keep seeing that. Makes sense. Positive influence as a couple. I wonder, because we saw that they both support charities together, I wonder if there's something that they did specifically together as Zayn and Louis, potentially. They need to learn balance, and Zayn feels luckier and more adventurous around Louis too, which I do see, because, Louis seems to be, with what we have seen so far, a bit, more okay with the attention and all of that. And I feel like that would definitely help Zayn, potentially feel more adventurous, to have someone that is out there, enjoying this lifestyle and everything. I feel like that would have helped Zayn. Particularly, we're seeing he feels lucky and more adventurous around that. Louis expands Zayn's way of thinking about life, take risks as a couple, which this could literally be anything. Young men and teenage boys as well, they were, at the beginning of it anyway. You put them in a situation where they have lots of fame, lots of money, they have lots of freedom, in a way. There's going to be risks taken. They support people in need. So it seems like they really, as these two, it seems like there's a real strong element of that together. Zayn's moon trine Louis' Uranus. They both feel free to express themselves. So it seems like a safe environment with these two anyway, sharing secrets and all of that. Louis is more open around Zayn, and ideas of unconventional domestic setup bring them together. I mean, makes sense, considering, they were kind of living, out of the suitcases for a while, basically. They can cope with sudden changes together, and there's a level of unpredictability, duh. Louis feels safe around Zayn, and they enjoy talking about social issues. So I feel like with these two, there's a really nice, safe element. I feel like they're able to, at least, express and, share deeper matters together. Maybe not connect emotionally, but at least, have a confidant within the other. And it seems like they are able to talk about more, I guess, humanitarian issues together, more social issues, which is nice. Mutual friends bring them together. I mean, I guess in a sense, I don't know, because producers would be a mutual connection, but is it a friend? I mean, it's there. Zayn's moon trine Louis' Neptune. Zayn picks up on Louis' needs and inspire the other. So I guess going back to, we did see how this relationship boosts Zayn's intuitiveness. Potentially he's just very intuitive and, in sync with Louis. Art is a shared interest, and they sense each other's feelings. They share a sensitive and mystical worldview. It's a mystical meeting. I mean, yeah, in a way it is. You by chance, you kind of, are in a group together, then you become, megastars overnight. That's pretty, mystical. They both uncover the other's blind spots. So now it's time for Mercury. We have Louis' Mercury in Sagittarius and Zayn's Mercury in Capricorn. Zayn encourages Louis to focus on physical aspects of life. Maybe you could read this as, because we saw there was a thing with confusing reality and illusions. Maybe Zayn encourages Louis to potentially focus on more reality rather than the illusion of fame, because that seems to be more Louis' priority. So potentially Zayn kind of is the one to encourage Louis to be focus on reality. Louis resents Zayn for his criticism. Louis really doesn't I guess, Zayn's more constructive criticism when he has something more critical to say. Zayn sees Louis as impractical, and Louis sees Zayn as someone with no vision. I mean, I guess he definitely doesn't seem to have a vision for fame and notoriety and all of that. They help each other with their strengths. Yeah, I feel one is the talent. Not to say Louis isn't talented, of course, but it seems with these two, Louis was very much the driving force for getting the fame and everything and wanting to put themselves out there, whereas Zayn's focus was on the music. Louis' Mercury overlaid in Zayn's 9th house. Travel, culture, and philosophy are common topics of conversation, and Zayn is impressed with Louis' knowledge. Louis gives Zayn a greater perspective on life, which we're seeing again. Zayn's Mercury overlaid in Louis' 9th house, so this is repeated, just inverted, so everything from before that applied is emphasized. but also Louis is impressed with Zayn's knowledge, and Zayn gives Louis a greater perspective on life, which I feel like we have seen this before. We saw Louis really admire Zayn's knowledge and like intellectual side right in the beginning. But I think with both of these two, because we saw that they both give each other greater perspective on life, we did see before how like they help each other be more culturally aware. So I assume that is where it would come through, that greater perspective on life. Louis' Mercury squares Zayn's Venus. Mundane communication is difficult. I see this because it seems like when they are like working together, we have seen a whole lot of like relationship opportunities, fortune, like all of that sort of thing. But I feel like with what we have seen when it comes to more like working together, that sort of element with like, the whole thing where like Louis gets irritated with like Zayn's perfectionism, his more criticalness. It seems like there is a bit of like a disconnect when it comes to communicating about more work things, more mundane things in their life, I imagine, when it comes to music and that sort of thing. Seems like there is a conflict there. Exchanging ideas is a source of conflict and there are frequent disagreements. They need to learn to listen to each other, we're seeing again, and they have difference in music taste. Yet that's not a great thing to have when you're making music together, and I feel like it really reflects with these two. Louis' Mercury sextile Zayn's Jupiter. Zayn appreciates Louis' thoughts and ideas, which is nice that Zayn seems to be more receptive of it than Louis to Zayn. There's open communication, there's a strong friendship, and business together is beneficial. We're seeing again. Zayn often gives Louis the benefit of the doubt. Honestly, there seems to be a weird like parent-child dynamic because we're seeing like, although like Zayn is flattered by like Louis and, doesn't, appreciate him in some ways, it seems like Louis very much admires, Zayn, but doesn't necessarily take on what he actually says and advises and all of that. And we have been seeing how Louis tends to be a bit more codependent. It seems like a funny like parent-child dynamic. There's an optimistic meeting and they enjoy traveling together. So I like that we're seeing that they enjoy spending time together, have fun together. It seems like the whole lifestyle they actually manage to do together really well. They love to laugh together and they intellectually stimulate each other. Zayn's Mercury trine Louis' Jupiter. Louis is enthusiastic about Zayn's thoughts and ideas. It just doesn't seem like he really takes it on, it seems like they're not 100% with it. There's a strong friendship and there's positive and inspiring conversations. Louis can be too lenient with Zayn. I wonder what way. Louis introduces Zayn to new ways of thinking. This keeps coming up with Louis, which I find really fun. It's an optimistic meeting and Zayn helps Louis with self-expression. Interesting. Like, I imagine it would be with like expressing himself through music. They enjoy traveling together and business together is advantageous. I feel like I'm like a broken record at this point. They come from different cultures, which we discussed at the beginning. Zayn's Mercury conjunct Louis' Uranus. Louis challenges Zayn's way of thinking. So Louis really is like, Zayn's way of thinking. He's really trying to flip that and everything. It seems like we keep seeing this from Louis. They both enjoy experimenting and they come up with original ideas together. So I can imagine like, they're probably like kind of challenging. It seems like they're opening to challenge each other's like way of like music. I can imagine it is. So it seems like they're both like, play around and experiment with like their different music tastes and maybe merging them in some ways. Whatever they do with it, it seems like they're open to like creating new ideas together with that. They're impulsive together and they discover new ways of seeing the world together. I can imagine. Zayn truly understands Louis' originality. So potentially, it seems to be more on Louis' end. But maybe on Zayn's end as well, like he kind of like sees where, admires Louis, but also, wants it his way as well. They are creative together and they grow intellectually together. They share an interest in unusual topics and they casually talk about taboos and they find uncommon solutions to problems. Zayn's Mercury conjunct Louis' Neptune. Spirituality is prioritized, which we saw earlier, so interesting. They have a telepathic-like connection, particularly on Zayn with Louis. Zayn helps Louis turn his dreams into reality, which, they both do. Like, it is a help. I wonder maybe like if there was some kind of technicality of like, I don't know, like Zayn was definitely considered for the band, but like Louis wasn't, and like Zayn was like, hey, maybe he's cool, I don't know, like something like that. Maybe there was some kind of technicality in that way. Deceptive, exaggerative communication. Okay. They are compassionate towards each other and Zayn finds Louis confusing. Hard to talk about practical matters. I guess it would be confusing for Zayn because it would be confusing, I can imagine. Like, he sees Louis, admires him, but like, he doesn't seem to genuinely, like, respect him. So now it's time for Venus. We have Louis' Venus in Scorpio and Zayn's Venus in Pisces. These are both water signs. They instantly bond. They have an emotionally deep relationship. Yet considering what we have seen, I feel like emotionally really not so much. Deep, sure. Like, they do seem to be quite open, like, talking about, you know, secrets of each other and all of that. Louis may be threatened by Zayn. Maybe that's why he doesn't fully take on what Zayn says, because like maybe he is sort of like feels a bit threatened, like, wow, he's better than me, kind of can't support this. They have common ground as well, which obviously I feel like in music, in some way it would be with music. Like, yes, they have different music tastes, but they both seem to have an affinity and talent for that. Louis' Venus overlaid in Zayn's 8th house. Louis is captivated by Zayn and Louis is willing to do anything for Zayn, so it seems like there is that weird element. Louis really admires Zayn, but it seems like, I guess from a distance, you could say, because it seems like in a genuine sense, when it actually comes down to more practical things, he doesn't really care to really take on what Zayn, you know, has to offer. It's a transformative relationship. This is being repeated again. I'm a record player. Zayn's Venus overlaid in Louis' 11th house. Zayn immediately likes Louis, so it's nice that they seem to have, like, connected pretty quickly. They are both open with each other, we've seen again, and Louis senses he can be himself around Zayn. They are comfortable with each other, and they both share the same social activities. Yeah, obviously. I feel like, you know, they're both in the same, literally the same social circle, you could say. They are good friends, which we're seeing again. Louis' Venus trines Zayn's Mars. Zayn enjoys spending time with Louis, and it's a fulfilling relationship, definitely in that sort of more profitable way. Louis makes Zayn feel confident and desirable. Like, I'm sure with the admiration that Louis is giving him, and the sort of like boost of confidence, I'm sure Zayn feels that way. I think particularly like, because there was that whole dynamic with One Direction as a whole, where like I feel like Zayn was a bit more like ostracized, particularly with like how they branded him and his ethnicity. And with these two, we have seen a couple of times already that there is that sort of like cultural awareness connection. So potentially Louis does help Zayn with that journey. Louis' Venus squares Zayn's Saturn. Zayn is critical and demanding of Louis. I mean, we saw the critical thing, so I'm not shocked. Louis sees Zayn as unsympathetic. I mean, if Zayn is a perfectionist and a bit more critical, maybe he can come off as being a bit more controlling and just not really sympathetic to what anyone else has to contribute, which, fair enough. Louis eventually withholds affection from Zayn, so it seems like eventually I interpret this as like the sort of admiration he is giving Zayn, which, you know, I mean, publicly they're not really friends, are they? So I guess it's not surprising to see that there are deteriorating factors here. Zayn sees Louis as childish and undisciplined again. Criticism is rooted from jealousy. Yeah, I mean, we did see this before with Louis and potentially feeling a bit threatened. So potentially, I mean, they both have a reason to be a bit jealous of the other. As I said, like, Zayn focused on the talent, you know, Louis is the one that actually likes the attention, can push the actual music. So they both have reasons to be, you know, jealous of each other, and they have a strength the other doesn't have. Louis' Venus sextiles Zayn's Uranus. Zayn likes to keep the relationship exciting, and they share unusual interests, which we're seeing again. It's an unconventional couple. I mean, in a way it is, yeah. Like, you know, they're both these famous modern day Beatle type people. Louis is drawn to Zayn's unique qualities, and Zayn feels appreciated by Louis, we're seeing again. Louis' Venus sextiles Zayn's Neptune. They prefer to see each other as a fantasy. This is interesting, considering I feel like there is a bit of an element we have seen where the reality and illusions is a thing. So maybe they prefer to see each other as, like, you know, the boy band version of them potentially. I mean, you know, there seems to be an element where Louis is able to help with that persona, so maybe there is a disconnect there. But maybe they just prefer to see each other in that sort of, like, when they were in their prime, because we don't see them really together, you know, at the moment after the band. So potentially they just prefer to see each other as that sort of like, fantastical part in their life, maybe. They are tolerant of each other and they share spiritual interests. We're seeing again, spirituality is very strong for these two. Louis may expect too much from Zayn, which I feel like this would be related to, like, I guess the more fame aspects. If Zayn is not drawn to that, it's one of those things, like, I guess, like being out there, public speaking and all of that. It's not the easiest thing to force, and if it comes very naturally to Louis and not so much for Zayn, I feel like you could definitely see this as like, Louis expects way too much of Zayn, to be obsessed with the fame, very comfortable with it, I guess you could say. Louis' Venus conjunct Zayn's Pluto. Manipulation of the other can occur. I don't like this. There's a deep emotional tie. As I've said, it seems like there's a bit more to indicate there is a bit more emotional challenges than not. It seems like they are just both very, like, confidential with each other. It's karmic, and Zayn can read Louis. We're seeing, again, Zayn being able to be very intuitive of Louis. Zayn's Venus opposite Louis' Jupiter. It's a promising relationship. I mean, definitely. And it fulfilled those promises. They share an optimistic life together. I mean, while they were, like, obviously with the band together, I mean, it was a pretty optimistic life in some senses. Like, I know there were definitely challenges with that one, but definitely in some ways, they kind of are living the dream. Both have a problem with promising more than they can give, and they are generous with each other. Louis' Venus sextile Zayn's Uranus, so this is a repeated aspect, just inverted, so everything from before is further emphasized, but also Louis likes to keep the relationship exciting. Zayn is drawn to Louis' unique qualities, and Louis feels appreciated by Zayn. So now it's time for Mars. We have Louis' Mars in Sagittarius and Zayn's Mars in Cancer. Neither like dealing with problems directly, always a great thing. Louis sees Zayn as clingy. Interesting. I would have thought it would be the other way around, but no. Both are extreme emotionally. I would assume this is something as individuals they can possibly relate to about each other, but not necessarily, rely on each other upon. Zayn gets hurt by Louis' bluntness. I can imagine when it comes to, I guess, the more like fame, public speaking part of it, and Louis is kind of a bit more forceful, like, go and Louis is a bit more forceful and a bit more pushy, expecting too much of Zayn. Louis' Mars overlaid in Zayn's 9th house. There's a strong need to travel together. Traveling again keeps coming up, not surprisingly so. There's easygoing chemistry, and Louis is more straightforward around Zayn. Okay, so potentially he's just always blunt around Zayn, and he just doesn't like that. Louis is drawn to Zayn, and Louis feels he can have a good time with Zayn, which they seem to do. Like, we've seen they have fun together, they love to laugh together, so that's nice. Zayn's Mars overlaid in Louis' 3rd house. Zayn is more blunt around Louis. I mean, the whole criticism thing makes sense. Louis may intimidate Zayn. Yeah, there seems to be a bit of a jealousy thing, their strengths, the opposite strengths, the other strengths are intimidating the other, it seems like it. Louis is sensitive to Zayn's intensity. Louis' Mars sextiles Zayn's Jupiter. Zayn encourages Louis to assert his independence. Yeah, I mean, there does seem to be that element of like Louis really needs to like be less codependent, go out on his own a bit. It's competitive. I'm sure it has become competitive. Louis feels more energized by Zayn, and they encourage each other to engage in controversial behavior. We did see that, yeah, they might do reckless things together. I mean, which understandably so, as I said before, like, you put young anyone, but I feel like particularly young, teenage boys, men, and give them a lot of money, give them a relatively decent amount of freedom. It's all over. They like to try new things together. Going back to how they are able to, like, experiment together, come up with original ideas together. They have a lot of fun together. Yeah, as I said, which, it seems like this fun might be a bit more reckless, but, it's in the past now. Zayn's Mars sextile Louis' Jupiter, so this is a repeated aspect, just inverted. So Louis encourages Zayn to assert his independence, and Zayn feels more energized by Louis. Zayn's Mars opposite Louis' Uranus. Zayn needs to learn to not take Louis' actions personally. I assume this will be relating to, like, the straightforward bluntness thing as well, but also the whole thing with, like, him admiring Zayn, but also not really. Maybe that just isn't personal. That's just the way, Louis is. there's frequent arguments, which would probably stem from the whole like mundane communication being difficult and everything, and just generally disagreeing, particularly when it comes to music. Zayn's Mars opposite Louis' Neptune, opposite approaches to taking risks. This is interesting because risk seems to be a thing. But also, besides in that more fun, light-hearted way, maybe when it comes to their careers and everything, argue about the differences between their wants. Particularly, I can imagine when it comes to like what they want the music to sound like and everything. Zayn's Mars, Trine Louis Pluto. They accomplish a lot together, not surprisingly so, and enjoy the power play between them. This is weird because they do have a bit of a weird power dynamic, I guess you could say. You know, Zayn being a bit more like of the parent role, Louis being a bit more dependent and needing to be encouraged to be a bit more independent. So it's a bit odd. They both go for big changes here, not surprisingly so. Potential for both to get possessive. This is interesting considering obviously Zayn left. And I'm pretty sure in the last reading we did with Zayn and Harry, there was a lot more of like, you know, Harry being possessive of Zayn and everything. Which with these two, Zayn and Louis, we haven't seen really anything of possessiveness. But we have been seeing like Louis being a bit more codependent of Zayn. Maybe in that kind of way, Zayn felt like Louis was a bit more possessive. But it is an interesting thing considering, you know, that Zayn left. The whole thing. Zayn helps bring out Louis' subconscious to the surface. Interesting. Like, there does seem to be, particularly on Zayn's end, being a bit more intuitive. Maybe he's the one that drives a bit more of the spiritual, intuitive element with these two. So that was the final aspect, bringing us to the end of the reading. If you are still watching, please share your thoughts below. I'd be very curious to see how you guys interpret this one. I feel like it was a bit of not what I expected, considering how I feel like this feels a bit different than the relationship with Zayn and Harry. So it is interesting to see that they both had, I mean, obviously they had different relationships with the other, but, you know, it's not, like, similar at all. So it's nice, I guess it's nice, you know, that we saw a bit of a different, you know, relationship in this whole group. If you have made it this far, please consider subscribing for more. I post these readings weekly. Besides that, give this video a like, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!